tweet at us at WTAE Podcast on Twitter and let us know, because maybe there's something that you see that we don't see.
Spider-Man 3. I'm going to explode. I'm not going to put that in there.
And we're on.
We're recording. Okay, and we're live. Thank you for joining us today. This is Worth the Admission Podcast. I am B. Frank.
And I'm Travis.
And here is where we discuss many things, movies, TV, and the always fluid pop culture.
And I actually watched some movies this week.
Did you watch the Hellboy trailer?
I did. I got a chance to see it. I liked it. I thought Dan Harbour, I think he did a better job playing Hellboy than I originally thought. Because I remember being him serious in Stranger Things, but I thought it was funny. I thought it was action-packed.
It looks like it's going to be a lot more lighthearted than the Guillermo del Toro ones. Like, I know that there were funny moments in those ones, but this one just feels like they're having more fun with it. Kind of based on the way that the trailer was formed and kind of what we got to see.
Well, that one and also the Men in Black trailer this week. That had a different feel to it, too. I mean, those are both properties that are being... I guess you can't call Men in Black rebooted, but Hellboy essentially is being rebooted because...
Men in Black is getting an expanse. They're building out their universe, quote-unquote, via the trailer. Marvel's Runaways Season 2 came out.
I haven't watched it. I know it's on Hulu. I know you're big into it. And let me guess, you binged the whole season in like a day.
Yeah, I finished the 13th episode at work today at like noon. That was pretty fun. I got to watch the last half of the season and get paid for it.
You really have a truly tough life, or at least a tough job.
Well, I can tell you that it's going to be a long year wait, because the end of that season was really good. We got quite the cliffhanger. Bird Box came out. I think you watched that one as well.
Yeah, this is the first movie I think we've both watched in a somewhat reasonable time frame. Either you've seen it and I've seen it way down the road. This is actually the first time I wanted to see a movie when it came out, and I want to get your thoughts on this movie because I got a ton of mixed emotions. I think you put it perfectly. It's A Quiet Place meets The Happening, and he's not wrong. That's pretty spot on. And if you've seen either one of these movies, you kind of will have something to expect. But I want to talk to you about it because I had a lot of questions. There's parts of it I really liked. I won't try to go too spoilerish because I know it is brand new. It just hit Netflix a couple days ago. Maybe not everybody's seen it. But what did you think of the movie overall?
I thought it started off strong.
Those first 20 minutes were intense.
Yeah, the story from there kind of... It took us on a ride, but after about 20 minutes in, I thought to myself, I don't think we're going to get an answer as to what these actually are. Rel's character went over some of the different lore, which was interesting. It's not something that we usually get, but we didn't really get an explanation as to what or why they were. And so that was a little frustrating because I felt kind of gypped on that, kind of like their previous movie, How It Ends. A good movie, just not really fully there, I felt like.
That's the movie I was going to bring up, How It Ends, and I just felt so unsatisfied by the end of the movie. I ended up having a lot more questions, and just like with How It Ends, I wanted more. And with that movie was over 2 hours, I believe. And so you had plenty of time to explain the story, and I don't feel like we got that.
It could have spent some of the time kind of giving us a little bit more character depth, explaining maybe more of what those who are inflicted see.
I was fascinated with that. You know my favorite scene in that movie or death that happens, but I always wanted that extra bit of explanation.
It brings up an interesting point though, is, from a character standpoint, I understand it because the characters themselves have no idea what these things are, but then as an audience member, I want to know. And that brings up The Happening, because the end of that movie, the reasoning behind why it was happening was there. And it's like, if they would have come up with a reason and it not be to our liking, it could have hurt the movie further, but it also could have lifted it up. It's one of those things you kind of have to roll the dice. And I think it kind of landed on snake eyes.
With that small of a cast, I don't need to know everything, but I'd like to know something. And I want a life or a death or something to mean or have an impact or give me a reason to understand more. When a character would be swapped out or a character would go away or a character would come in, I never really thought they got their due, and it made it seem more jumbled to me.
Maybe caring about the characters more would have provided us with a little bit more finality.
They're trying to give people something to watch when they're all together, or they're trying to put a big movie star in. And I enjoyed that. I thought she did a great job in it. She did make me believe it was worth watching at the end, because I thought her character goes through a lot in that movie. I mean, you see different aspects of how it goes. Part of you feels cheated. There's parts of it I really liked, and I actually wanted to see it more. I don't ever regret seeing it, because I actually did enjoy the movie to a certain point. I thought it was okay, but I thought the plot holes is what made it a bad movie.
Even a bad movie is worth watching sometimes.
And you, sir, you got an early jump on the holiday movies. I am going to go see Mary Poppins this week, so I will give a review of that next week. You, sir, did get to go see Aquaman.
Of course.
A couple days ago. I do want to hear what you thought of the movie. Between Bumblebee, Spider-Man, Mary Poppins, and there's too many choices out there. I mean, those are just some of the major ones, but I couldn't decide. So I was excited to hear that you enjoyed it and you got a chance to see it.
Well, Aquaman, spoiler-free, pun intended, is quite the water ride.
How dare you? No puns.
Before getting into anything about the movie itself, I'm going to put a little asterisk here because my recommendation is that you pee twice before the movie starts. People kept getting up, and it took me 3/4 into the movie to realize that it is an entire movie about running water.
So you said get the large soda at the theater.
You might want to go without a soda. Like it's 2.5 hours long, and it fills every bit of that time.
Well, I have a question. What do you think about the long run times on movies? Like a movie like that's 2.5 hours. Even like, say, we'll go back to it like we always do. Avengers, Infinity War. That was a long movie. What do you think about movies that are that long? Does it benefit? We just reviewed a movie that was 2 hours long, and neither of us seemed to enjoy it as much as we did. Was it too long? Especially for a movie like this, which is a big budget action, superhero movie. That's 2.5 hours. Is it worth that time in there? Is there a lot of dead points, or do you actually get everything you want out of that movie?
The time is well spent. With movies that are 2.5 hours, 2 hours, 20 minutes or longer, a lot of it is about the pacing. If you're watching something that's 2.5 hours and it's just a slow movie, you're just going to hate it. You're going to feel like you've been there forever. But when you have that same amount, 2.5 hour movie, but everything is happening, everything is going fast, the story is constantly progressing and changing and moving, it doesn't feel like 2.5 hours, but you still get all of the information. And I think that they used the time very well. There were no dead points that I felt while watching it. Everything kind of kept my attention. I mean, I even thought about going to the bathroom, but was like, I know that I need to stay here because I don't know what's going to happen next. And it's kind of always on the verge of tipping over. But the story really fills in that time.
So now we saw Aquaman in Justice League. Is this before or after?
This is after, but there are only 2 sentences. There were 2 sentences about it, and then that was it. So it takes place after Justice League, but it also kind of is built in a way that kind of throws Justice League out. Because in Justice League, it felt like Arthur Curry was already the king, and this movie is about him becoming a king, both on the throne and to believe in himself.
My biggest question, another big question I have for you is, people are so torn on DC movies. You get a good one, you get a bad one. Some people like me who are not a big fan of DC movies, never have. I did enjoy Wonder Woman. I know that was a change of pace, but just in normal terms for me, if I'm going to put on a superhero movie to watch, 10 out of 10 times it's going to be a Marvel movie, no matter if I've seen it 1 time or 10 times. Now, when it comes to Aquaman, what was different about this one that you can say from maybe a movie that didn't do as well as people thought, say like Batman vs. Superman?
Yeah, I felt it was a good representation of Aquaman. It felt like his movie. Like Wonder Woman, this is a movie that is built kind of on its own, in the sense that Man of Steel in its own way, Batman, Superman, Justice League, it was all a route to get a universe created. Whereas if you just make the best single movie that you can, like if you make the best Batman movie you can, and then make the best Superman movie you can, and then bring those together, that's what the after credits are for. They're there to expand the universe, and that's one thing that Marvel has kind of capitalized on. The movie itself is the best movie it can be, and then the after credit is what expands into something else. DC seems to have taken a note from that line, because this was just a great Aquaman movie. Obviously, there's not a whole lot to base it off of, other than Smallville and any other animated ones, and I think that they set the bar pretty high. It seems that James Wan gave Jason Momoa the freedom to kind of make it his own, and he does so. Aquaman is a funny guy, he's a good guy, and he's the reluctant king. He doesn't want to be it, but I guess he'll do it if he has to. And so it was a good representation and a good standalone and a good DC movie.
Now, from here, where do they go? Because you stay up a lot more on the DC side than I do. The post-credit scene, I'm sure this has one. Does that set up going further for just another Aquaman movie, or is it setting up to expand the universe even more?
There is one mid-credit scene, and it is there to expand Aquaman. It's not there to expand the world. Based on just things that I've read, there's a possibility that we might just get Wonder Woman movies, and then Aquaman movies, and then Flash movies. We might only get single movies, and they'll just be there to create those movies and not build the universe, at least right now, which I think is smart. Honestly, I think that they should, with all the projects that they have coming out, their DC Universe app, they should create their multiverse right now, and then that way their offshoot Joker movie, offshoot Batman movie, those could all be part of their rebranded DC multiverse, and it would give them something specific and different from Marvel that they could bring to life. Like, you could have 12 different Joker movies with 12 different Jokers, and then have one movie where they all come together. Anything is possible when you build it like that, and I think if they do it that way, it could prove to be very fruitful.
Obviously, your big draws are always going to be Batman and Superman. But, I guess you can even throw Wonder Woman into that with the success of that first movie. But is it prove going to be successful in the long run by bringing these characters that you weren't sure, maybe if you didn't want to see them or you didn't want to see them, like Flash and the Aquaman? From what it sounds like, you enjoyed Aquaman. But do you think it's enough to keep that universe expanding with... I don't want to call them B characters because they're not. But obviously when you think of DC, you're obviously thinking of those heavy hitters. Is that something that's going to hinder them? Because I know, like, Marvel took a chance on Guardians of the Galaxy and it worked out. Is it going to be kind of one of those situations where, something is more surprising than they thought it was going to be or more successful, and that's what helps create the universe? Or is this just one of those movies where down the road you're just going to go, oh yeah, that was an Aquaman movie, or oh, that was a Flash movie? Those are more throwaway movies that you get from some of the sequels.
No, I think that they will still try to build the universe, but they're going to do it slower. They've learned that jumping in isn't the best way, and I think that they understand that they need to build their characters before moving them on. But with DC, in order to do Justice League, you've got the main group, and there is a Green Lantern Corps movie that at least at one point was slated to come out. Marvel can take those chances because they have that vast amount of characters. A lot of the DC stuff, you've got the major heavy hitters, but on a Justice League front, it's all about the villains. And if you can build a good rogues gallery within that universe or multiverse, then they can do it that way. But I don't think they could just pop out a random name and make it work, kind of like how Marvel's done.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So overall, what are the best things to take away from this movie? And what are some things that you thought which could be better?
The story itself was kind of built, as far as how it was edited together, kind of like Man of Steel, where it started off him as a baby and then jumped forward to him as an adult and then just kind of played back and forth as he grew up. It made certain parts of his backstory relevant to that scene or to that next scene. There were multiple locations that the characters visited, which never made it feel static. It's what kind of kept the drive going. It kept the flow of the movie going. In the flashbacks, they do some digital de-aging for some of the characters, which is noticeable, yes, but is considerably better than a CG'd off mustache. So I was pretty surprised at that. I was surprised that they went that route. It was just something that I wasn't expecting. The cinematography was really cool and very interesting because there was a lot of action in the movie. There was a lot of fighting. The fight choreography itself was fantastic, especially the underwater fight scenes. That paired with the cinematography made it feel like you were floating in the water as well.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, and so the action underwater made the cinematography feel even cooler because you were kind of a part of it. Now, one thing with one of the underwater scenes, it was just one of the things that caught my eye. It was underwater, and it's like a big meeting or something. They're underwater, and Orm floats down, but he floats over stairs. And I thought to myself, why would you have stairs underwater? And that was the only time you saw them. That was the only time I noticed stairs. It was just one of those funny things that I was like, that's interesting.
Just because, just in case.
The music was cool, like the score itself. Sound and music and scores to movies are one of those things that we don't often think about as moviegoers without the extra sound effects or without...
It builds the drama. It builds the surroundings. It immerses you. I mean, those sounds do just as much justice. You could be watching a big action sequence, like you said, underneath water, but if there's no sound, no music, no sound effects, it becomes really dull. It takes you right out of there because you don't feel like you're in that moment now.
Right. And there were only two, and they were lyrical tracks during the movie that I felt didn't really. One was kind of a hat on a hat. They played Africa in the Safari. And then there was a scene with Black Manta during his transformation that just didn't really feel like the world. It didn't feel of the world that we were witnessing. So it kind of drew me out a little bit there. But Black Manta all around was cool. And the biggest thing about the movie, which is intriguing on many levels, is it was visually stunning. I mean, the trailers did a good job of showing some of that underwater stuff, some parts of Atlantis. But the movie itself, a lot of it does take place underwater. And it is visually pleasing. It is visually stunning. It is really cool to look at. Just the colors, how everything works and flows, just works really well underwater. That is something I would love to see how it was filmed on. And the reason it's intriguing is because Aquaman was made with a $160 million budget. And to kind of put that into perspective, Wonder Woman was built on a $150 million budget. So kind of showing you how much of that was special effects. But then you had Man of Steel and Justice League, which were 250 and 300 million, respectively.
It was almost too much. It's almost overkill with some of those. That's what I felt with a lot of those DC movies. Bigger budgets are great, but at the same time, too, when everything is CG and it doesn't look as well, being underwater, it looked really cool. It had a different vibe off it that I thought you don't get to see as much. You don't see a lot of underwater movies.
To see how good that world looks on screen, finalized, at only $160 million to make is really impressive on a filmmaker standpoint and from an audience standpoint. Now, I know not a lot of audience members look at those kinds of numbers, but it is something that will tell you a lot about a movie, and it really does show you what you can do. You just have to sometimes think outside of the box, and it feels like that's what James Wan did to create this, but it worked really well for him.
So overall, though, obviously I'm going to guess you say it's worth the admission. But where do you rank this in between the DC movies?
Presently, I would rank it in the top 3 based on everything we've had. Wonder Woman was cool, and it was obviously a very big step for female heroes and females in general in a filmmaking industry standpoint. But from a visual standpoint, Aquaman kills all of the rest of them. With such a high budget that Justice League did, I don't think it looked nearly as good as Aquaman did. And so I think with the right direction and with the right eye and artistry, you can always do better. And so I'd definitely put Aquaman in the top 3. I'd probably give it an 8 out of 10. 9s and 10s are reserved for
perfect movies,
very special ones. So 8's pretty high. Like Infinity War.
No, Infinity War, even for as long as the movie was, I mean, I just watched that again recently. It's a really good movie, and it does a great balancing act with as many characters that you have in that movie. You never feel overwhelmed, and I'm glad with, especially a new movie with like such a big world that you're not used to seeing. Sometimes if it looks good, it's going to bring you into it. Sometimes if it's not, it makes the movie seem to drag a little bit more or leaving you want a little bit more. So I'm glad that looks good. I know it's not a perfect movie, but an 8 out of 10 still, that's very respectable.
I'll put it to you this way. I'm excited to see what they do next. Now you got a chance to watch Venom this week, right?
I did. I actually watched it about a time and a half. I didn't get through 2 full sittings because I just didn't have the time. But yes, I did indeed finally see Venom.
And now is the point where you give me a review, because I've been waiting since October 4th to get your take and your view from it.
Okay, so with Venom, even since it's been such a long time, it's already been out now, it's been in theaters, it's on digital. I wasn't sure what to expect because you get those original kind of what people are saying about it, and I heard mixed reviews. I heard it was funny in certain parts, and the funniness almost didn't feel awkward, but it felt really oddly placed in the movie. From a comic book aspect, I enjoyed it. To me, it just felt over the top. It was really kind of a cool way to bring that character in, and the origin story was the entire film. A lot of films are superhero films now. You get the mythos or the backstory first third of the movie. Your first act is usually just your setup, and then the actual movie is the last 2 acts. This was kind of cool because you got to see right up front. You weren't sure what was going to happen because I'm not a huge... In the comics, I've never really read Venom, and in the movies, all you got was that terrible Spider-Man 3 of Topher Grace that everybody really tries to forget. This movie felt different with, Tom Hardy as Eddie Brock. I liked it.
I was entertained with those. I felt it was an interesting way to do it. Because Venom is an alternate personality, I felt it was an interesting way to present that to Eddie in relation to the audience.
I don't know. I had struggles with him in the beginning just because I wasn't really crazy about the character, and at least how he portrayed the character. I thought he was a little bit too much all over the place, especially when he starts to turn crazy. I know that's a little bit further into the movie, but he has such a weird dramatic swing in the first part of that movie after I guess it's not really a spoiler anymore, when he goes to Riz Ahmed, I forget his character name.
Carlton Drake.
Yeah, he is the resident bad guy of the movie, and when his life kind of turns upside down at that point after he tries to interview him for, a scandal, and he gets kicked out, and obviously he gets fired, and his girlfriend gets fired, and everything kind of turns upside down. It was a really weird shift in the change of the movie. It flowed very well, and that's one of the things about the movie I liked. You got your action satisfaction. They didn't stand on anything else. And that was one of the things I did really respect about the movie, is they didn't go in with any other mythos. They didn't reference anything else. They tried to build this Venom movie on their own, especially with Spider-Man being more on the side of Disney right now and going through that and having to do this standalone movie by itself. It held its own. I liked the action. The story, to me, at points I really wanted to hate Eddie Brock. I just didn't like the way the character came off. By the end of the movie, I was into it. It's one of those movies that I flipped the script halfway through. At the beginning, I was like, oh, okay, this is okay. I'll get through it, and I'll have seen it, and that was it. By the end of the movie, I actually enjoyed it. I think it was the part when they're trying to capture him with Venom being in him after he's already been sick, and he's starting that fight scene in his apartment where he takes out everybody as he's having the mental conversation, and he's fighting the physical urges. And they have that whole motorcycle chase scene, which I thought was really, really cool, which honestly was my favorite action scene in the movie. I like the Venom. I mean, the end fight scene was good, but again, with a lot of those films, you don't get the full action scene. It's not as very long. I mean, that was a full, long scene through San Francisco, and I thought it looked really cool. I thought when you got to see what that character could do as Venom, I thought was really fun. When he puts his hands, where they're about to go over the railing, Venom throws his arms out and he flings the bike over, and it flies in the air and it lands back down. And he catches him and throws him back on the motorcycle, and they land, they keep going. I thought that was really cool. And that scene was a lot of fun. And I wanted more of that throughout the movie, because I just thought the points that were slow, they told the story, but I feel like the story I just felt there was gaps in it. It was just, you had too many stories going around. I really want to hear about the Drake storyline a little bit more, because I liked him as a villain. I don't know, I like good bad guys. And I thought in that kind of role, almost playing God, because that's essentially what they were doing with the symbiotes. They were just trying to connect a host because they couldn't survive on Earth. So it was kind of cool to see that devious mental side and what he wanted to do. But it was cool how Brock got to interact with it, and then you got to see him lose it and go get it back, and you got that roller coaster. It's kind of like riding a bike the first time. He fell down, he was off on a little bit, and by the end of the movie, when you got to see the full force, I thought that was awesome.
Now, I guess this is the point where spoilers are probably going to come up, so spoiler alert. So on a cinematography standpoint, the cinematography is probably what irritated me the most throughout the entire movie. In relation to those action sequences, I thought that the action was cool, but it was always a close-up. Most of the motorcycle ride was a close-up just on Eddie's face. When he's jumping around the first time, all the cops come, all that was really close. The final fight was really close, and I just would have loved to see that zoomed out more, because there was so much going on and they were so big. I don't think that they needed to fill that plus whatever size screen.
I understand where you're coming from, but at the same time, too, when you're only dealing with one singular character, I mean, even though you're dealing with just a general slew of bad guys, I mean, you can insert that into any kind of crime movie. You don't need to have a full expanded universe, because you're not really worried about what's going on around him, especially because you're looking at the internal struggle as well as the external struggle of him. He doesn't know what the hell's in him. When he first is infected, when he sneaks in, and then there's that big crazy escape scene, but he gets home and he starts rummaging through the trash and he's going crazy, and then he meets up with his ex, and then they have that scene inside the restaurant where he goes crazy and he dunks himself inside like the lobster tank. I look at it from that point of view. You're basically watching a very, I don't want to call it like a mental breakdown, but it's just like going crazy and trying to understand. So when you're looking at those scenes, I look at it as it's almost hyper focusing on just that for that reason, because you're more focused on what he's going to do as Venom or him turning into Venom than in just a broad range of an action scene like you would see in, say, another Marvel movie. I mean, whether it be like Deadpool, if you want to go the same kind of Fox, Sony, not kind of Disney route, where Deadpool's a little bit more expanded. They've got a few characters so they can kind of have a little bit wider action scene versus guy who doesn't really have any support in the movie other than him, who's also Venom inside the same body. So there's not really much else he can expand in a certain scene. I understand the close-ups, like when he flings the motorcycle and things like that. I wish I would have seen a little bit further, and you just got basically a generic zoomed-out version, but I would have liked to see better angles. I think angles would have made a difference in it, but I do get where you're coming from.
Another thing that this one particularly irritated me just because when we see the suit for the first time, we saw that in the trailer, and that was the prominent part of the trailer. One, I don't think that was necessarily a good way to show his first transformation, but even if it was going to remain that way, they should not have shown that in the trailer. They should have just shown him as Venom and as Eddie, but to show that transformation, especially being the very first time you see it in the trailer.
Yeah, I never want to be spoiled. I would have rather never seen what Venom was going to look like, or maybe just in a poster, maybe see a tease of it. But I didn't, you're right. You don't feel, I don't want to say cheated, but at the same time, if you already know what's coming, it's a little bit of a letdown. I would rather be fully surprised, engrossed in the movie, and getting to see it, because I think I would have a better reaction to it. Now, as for the suit, I thought the suit looked cool for CGI.
For not being part of Spider-Man, the suit did look cool. It was a little weird that that the symbiote itself was named Venom. That part was a little weird. I would have been okay if the first transformation, we are Venom, and then that's just it. I don't think that they had to give the symbiote a name to then give to Eddie. But on that kind of same mindset of the symbiote having its own very specific intelligence, the line toward the end where he tells Eddie that he's staying because he's changed him. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
I don't think we as an audience deserved that line yet, because I don't think we had seen enough of them bonding to have that line delivered to us. What do you think about that line? Because I'm very curious. A couple people agree with me that they don't think that line should have been delivered because we didn't get a chance to see that bond form. What did you think?
I just think it was a fast-forwarded version of it. I think when you're talking about the movie and you're talking about the symbiote fusing together with Eddie, I think you just got a rushed version. I think from the time that you see it enter him, which is 20, 30 minutes into the movie, at that point you're only looking at roughly about an hour, less than that, to really fully form that before you end up having that final battle sequence. And then obviously when he shields him from the blast that should have killed him from the rocket ship, you go, okay, well, I think you were supposed to get more of a purposeful attachment, I guess if you want to call it that, from that moment. But again, it didn't play out that well. It seemed kind of flat, and it came off a little bit flat. So I get where you're coming from in that line, but I also understand it from that point of view. You're already that deep into the movie, and it's kind of hard now to take that back. I mean, it seems a little bit forced, but at the same time, too, it does make sense in terms of they're banking on this going. Obviously, they announced a sequel, so that a sequel is going to happen, but that's kind of what they were trying to gear for. And they wanted to get all of it out of, oh, cool, they're bonded, and they understand each other, and now we move on. But you were still getting towards the end of the movie when he's waiting for his ex outside, and they have that last little interaction, and then he starts talking to him in the head.
That was hilarious. I loved that part. I laughed so hard.
I thought it was funny, but at the same time, too, you lose the importance of that line being said, especially you have to sell it more in terms of making it believable. Because you rush that storyline a little bit, I mean, that's the movie, is that storyline. So it could have been handled better with care, and it wasn't. So the line I'm okay with because I understand that it had to have come. They wanted you to leave that theater going, okay, I understand that they're bonded now and they're understanding each other, and now we can move forward. So the next part of that movie, the first part of the second movie, you're not still trying to explain what happened the first time.
I understand that. I also think it would have been really cool to see an evolution, which we might see, but to see an evolution of his powers, to see Eddie finding new things that the suit can do. And I'm sure we will get some of that, but it feels like they kind of all packed it in.
They did, because if you think about halfway through the movie when Eddie Brock, he gets the symbiote out of him when he's in the hospital. And you're talking more than halfway through the movie. In 20, 30 minutes, now the symbiote comes back and they reform, and now they're all buddy-buddy and everything's perfect. That's really rushed. You didn't have an end route for that character or that storyline going halfway through that movie. So now you get to the end, and it does seem forced for that line.
You fast forwarded to the after credits, right? Mid credits.
Yeah, I did see it. Refreshed me on it because I only watched it once. I didn't get through it the second time, and I saw it about a week ago.
Eddie has some interview at the prison.
Oh, yeah.
Played by
Woody Harrelson.
In front of Cletus Cassidy's cell. Kind of an odd-looking red wig.
To say the least.
Based on what I saw from this movie, I don't know if I'm excited to see Carnage in this particular universe. The reason I say that is I personally felt underwhelmed by the movie. A lot of the reviews placed it at like early 2000s, pre-MCU. Did kind of have that feel. But
but when you don't have a universe, you got to think they didn't put any other characters into this. This was a standalone. They tried to get a big actor. There's nothing to go off of. They didn't reference anything, and that was kind of a nice thing. But at the same time, too, I mean, what feel are you going to have? Because there's no universe to fall off of. Obviously, you can't fall in that Disney universe.
From a filmmaking standpoint, it felt like the movie itself could have been released in the early 2000s. Like, this is the Venom that should have been in Spider-Man 3. Given a better movie, but that's besides the point.
It would make it a little bit better, but I don't think you would do much more than that.
The one thing that I'm curious about, because this is going to make or break the movie for me, the second one. So Riot is more or less a copy-paste, given some slight additions to Venom's design. Like, from a computer generation standpoint, it seemed like it was, oh hey, we've got Venom, let's go ahead and make Riot, and we'll just add in a couple things. That is not the way that Carnage looks. That's not the way that he is. He's very fluid. He's very thin. He's not really muscular. And so I'm very intrigued to see how they bring Carnage to life via that CG, because if they don't do a good job, I'm going to feel very cheated. This is the first time we're seeing Carnage live action on a screen. Live action in general.
Yeah, I can understand with the problems with how he looked that there's going to be cause for concern. This incarnation of Venom is meant to go, to me it doesn't seem like it's going to go very far. It just seems like it's going to be a standalone character that gets a couple movies by himself, and then at the end of the day that's it. I mean, there's nothing to add to that. Obviously Carnage and some other characters, but you're not going to get anything other. You're not going to get another major hero. You're not going to get anything else. It's basically just going to be this style, so I think you're going to get a lot of the same going forward.
It'll be interesting to see if or how they bring Venom into a Morbius or a Black Cat or a Silver Sable movie, because they are trying to build a Sony universe of Marvel characters. Very long, drawn-out name. But they are trying to create their own universe, so at some point these characters are going to come together in some fashion. I mean, I'm guessing that's probably the hope. And so it'll be interesting to see how they do that, because he doesn't really play well with others. He never really has, but it'll be interesting to see that chemistry on screen.
I think he'll do good. I mean, with Tom Hardy, he is a brilliant actor, so I think he'll make us believe, but I think you're right. It more is going to come down to me how the story is, how it's written. I mean, you'd have to see how far they want to expand. They did kind of an expanding on the universe. They're either going to have to bring another character in and do a co-op movie, because I don't see any other way to expand it, at least at the rate that they want to. I don't know everybody that they have in their stable.
Basically Spider-Man villains.
Which is so weird. I hate when the early 2000s everybody bought up comic book properties, because now you can never get anything so fluid anymore.
Here's the thing. So with the Fox buyout, I think Sony is going to realize that they need to sell their stuff, because there's been talks about them wanting to stay with technology for quite some time. And I think if Disney made them the right offer, Sony would be like, here, fine. If they offered Sony $100 billion tomorrow, there's a chance I think they'd take it. Sony understands that they can't use Spider-Man anymore, especially in their new universe, because nobody's going to like a different version of Spider-Man than what we have right now.
Yeah, that's true. And I understand that. I would rather have everybody underneath one tent. But I understand trying to hold on to those properties and trying to make some money or trying to build something out of it. The thing is, there's just not enough pieces. It's like owning a puzzle but missing 3 or 4 pieces in the box. It's never going to be complete. And obviously Marvel has the most complete set so far. That's what makes it fun. but they're also really good at it. You also have to make good movies to be able to even have that happen. We never thought that Fox was going to sell the rights to Spider-Man, or at least lend the rights to Spider-Man. Sony. But look where we are now. I mean, you get a chance to see Spider-Man on the screen. And you never thought that was going to happen in a Disney movie.
I really hoped for it.
Well, we obviously really hoped for it. I'm still hoping to have an Avengers versus X-Men movie happen.
That could happen in like 10 years.
Well, obviously, you'd have to reboot, and Chris Evans is no longer going to be Captain America, and you have those pass-offs. Maybe whoever's... I don't know if they're going to do full reboots or how they're going to move on from there, but that's the one movie I would be down to see. Because I read the comics. I absolutely loved that comic. It was kind of cool just to see that many characters on the screen or on a comic book page, just like when you see, Infinity War or you saw Civil War, when you got to see those host of characters all on screen at one time is really awesome. More than just seeing the Avengers and, all 5 or 6 of them together around in that circle. That was cool, but to see characters that you never thought you would see on screen is even cooler. For our last segment, this is the time of year where you get all the year-end wrap-ups. Well, I want to get your take on the stuff that's coming out in 2019. Obviously, it's a big year. We've already started seeing trailers for Captain Marvel. We're really excited for Avengers Endgame. What about some of these other ones? Because we've talked to death on Avengers. We've already done a trailer breakdown and everything on it.
No pun intended.
No pun intended. There's a couple movies I picked out that I wanted to get your thoughts on and kind of see what you think you're going to get out of this next year in film. Because there's a lot of good films coming out. I mean, there's a list of 10 movies that I know I really want to see, but obviously how far we get close to seeing all of them. My first one, and obviously probably the biggest film I want to get your take on, is Episode 9, Star Wars. Basically a year from now. We're going to start hurtling towards that very quickly. Obviously, I know we're probably not going to get a trailer for a while, but what are your thoughts on that movie in 2019?
Episode 9 brings an interesting look at Star Wars for a few different reasons. One, you get a final confirmed end to the Skywalker saga, which this hasn't even really been a Skywalker saga. But you get the finality of this is going to be the last of the Skywalker stories, which is probably what they should have left it as. I think that they should have just started a new trilogy. But anyways, it'll be interesting to see how they work with what was given in the last film from a story standpoint. There were some pieces that J.J. Abrams set in motion that Rian Johnson kind of deleted. Like he just either didn't really bring it up or like killing Snoke. That was one of the big issues I had with The Last Jedi. And unless he's going to come back in some form, I just feel like we might have been cheated. I felt like The Last Jedi could have been tacked on to the end of The Force Awakens. Like I just feel like the story didn't necessarily progress as much as it could have.
I like The Force Awakens. I'm hoping with Episode 9, maybe he'll be able to touch back on certain things that happened in Episode 8, and that's why, especially with like Snoke dying. I'm wondering how they answer that, or if he's able to tie everything together, that makes you go, okay, maybe I don't understand Episode 8 right now, but maybe I'll understand it after Episode 9. I mean, there's always that hope as well too.
If it's built in a way that fully explains the questions that I had by the end of The Last Jedi, then I'm okay with it. But I have a feeling that J.J. Abrams is just going to kind of take it his own direction, which is obviously what he should do. But I think there are elements that we're kind of just going to get left out on.
I understand it, but I think people will still show up at the end of the day. It's Star Wars. You're not talking just a young Solo where people could have taken or leaving it. And I think that's why they shut down they shut down their movies going forward, is I don't believe they got quite the response that they were looking for that. Also, it was being shoved down our throats every year, and as much as I love Star Wars, I would rather see something new, and you really weren't getting that. The Last Jedi, there was aspects I really did like, but at the same time, too, the issues I had with it, that's a movie that people pick apart, that franchise. So when something's wrong in the lore of it all, people really lose their minds on it, and so I can understand the frustration of why it divided that, because you have the people who are loyal no matter what, and then you have the people that go, wait, this doesn't sound as right as I want it to be. So I feel like this new movie has to answer a lot of those questions.
I think J.J. Abrams understands that he does have some questions that need to be answered, because otherwise it just could feel incomplete. I guess we'll get the answer to that on December 20th, 2019.
Now, for my next movie, because there's a lot of them, so I only picked a few, and I know I missed out on a couple of them. But my next one, I guess we'll stay on the Disney side. Wait, I think all three of these are Disney, so I guess it doesn't really matter. What about The Lion King? Let's talk about that one. This is one I was intrigued on, but it sucks that we picked all Disney because I wanted to have a little bit of diversity, but they kind of own everything, and you're not forced, but they have so many movies coming out that you're eventually just going to either watching them or thinking about them or wanting to see them, because these live action reboots that they're making are intriguing. The cast looks good, the cast is strong, but again, I don't know if I care to see a live action Lion King. I mean, it doesn't do anything for me, but I want to hear what you think. Not only what your thoughts are on it, but do you think this is going to be as successful at the box office as they hope?
The animated Lion King was
fantastic.
It was fantastic. It's my favorite Disney movie of all time, and it was also one of the highest grossing movies for the time. It, in 1994, grossed almost $1 billion on its own. You got almost 30 years later, 25 years later, you're going to get a live-action reimagining, because it's not going to be a shot-for-shot remake, but we'll still see a lot of those same songs. I think Disney understands. I mean, they had Beauty and the Beast, which was good. Aladdin looks good.
I didn't care for Beauty and the Beast. I thought Beauty and the Beast was good, but I have no desire to see it again. It's not that I thought, oh, this is really similar. I just didn't care. If I wanted to see that incarnation, guess what? The reason why those animated movies are classics is because they're really good. I don't need a new version of it. And that's kind of the problem I have with these new movies, especially with Aladdin and things like that, are those kind of movies. Aladdin, Lion King, Jungle Book, Beauty and the Beast. I'm blanking on it. I'm trying to remember all of them. I think Cinderella had one as well, too. These are all animated movies. Obviously, I know they're not all in the same realm or in the same time frame of when they came out, as in their animated versions. But if you think about all of the ones that they've put out so far, no one's gone crazy about them. If you really want to see a live-action version of it, that's it. But if I had to pick one, I'm going to pick the animated one every single time.
The animated one is classic for a reason, but I think Disney understands how big this movie is going to have to be. I mean, they've got a hell of a cast, very musically inclined cast. It'll be interesting to see how the quote-unquote live-action animals talk consistently.
But I would rather watch a cartoon one. That's the thing, is I feel like you lose the heart in it. That's the problem I have with the live action. It's not that there's not great actors in it. I have to balance that line of this actor being in this role and whether I like him versus this or that, the other thing. Even though you usually have big name actors or voice actors that are in those animated roles, I don't always think of it as that. I kind of separate the two with like an animated or a kid's movie, because when you're looking at something live action, when you've seen it your entire life as in a different filter, it doesn't pay off as well to me. And I don't know why. Maybe it's just me and I'm weird, because I would prefer those. And I understand where you're coming from too. There's killers in every one of these casts. They're great. But the believability, it's not that it won't look good or it's greatly acted. It's that charm that you miss. That's something that can't be created, no matter how much money you put into a movie.
All right, what do we have for a third one?
Now we've started to see Spider-Man's no longer the new kid on the block. He's had his own standalone movie. He's been in 2 other, Marvel movies. Technically 4 movies then. He's made his impact.
So Stan Lee, prior to his passing, came out and said that Spider-Man was his favorite character. And Stan Lee's birthday is on December 28th. I think there's a possibility that they will release the trailer for it on his birthday. I think that's going to be basically a Stan Lee Christmas present to the world that he's created.
I mean, how do you think this one's going to stack up with everything else that's coming out?
With the secrecy surrounding Endgame, there's going to be very little we're going to find out about the story. Possible spoiler, I guess. The stealth suit that he's going to be using in the movie was on display last week, and there was an emblem on the right chest that was taken off. And it's possible, I think, that whatever happens in Avengers Endgame is going to push Peter into working in like a SHIELD fashion. I think that they'll find a way to have like an underground SHIELD. Otherwise, I really have no idea as far as what that patch could mean. Sony and Disney are working together to bring us the best Spider-Man that they can, and Kevin Feige is not going to allow us to view a Spider-Man that we don't. And so I think his vision, as well as the creative team behind the movie, I think that they're going to bring us a good, solid Spider-Man movie. I mean, with a villain like Mysterio And I've been asking for Mysterio since like Spider-Man 2 with Tobey Maguire. Finally being able to have Mysterio is a big step because it's not one of those widely known ones like the Vulture or Doc Ock or the Green Goblin. And so it's going to be very interesting to see how they utilize him in the movie and how that story is going to play out. Based on the after credits of Homecoming, it's possible that our third Spider-Man movie could be a Sinister Six movie. And so there's a chance that when he survives and goes to prison, that's when we're going to see the setup for our Sinister Six movie. Something that we've been teased for years. And I think it's going to also leave us wanting every bit more that they would give us.
I'm excited. Between Captain Marvel, Endgame, Spider-Man Far From Home, you've got a stacked lineup for Marvel on... I mean, not just Marvel, Disney, on an entire front. They are taking over the world slowly. Spider-Man, I can't wait. Just watching some of the scenes that he's in Infinity War really make me excited to see more. And especially being able to get another movie of just him, because I really loved Homecoming. I really enjoyed it. That's one of those flicks that I can sit down and put on and watch, and I've seen it probably 4 or 5 times now, and it holds its own for me. I love the story. I like understanding where he's coming from. I like where it starts off and takes place right after Civil War, and I like that you get to kind of see that whole breakdown of life after and just going back into a normal routine, especially for him being nobody, then becoming Spider-Man, then becoming a part-time Avenger, and then coming back and kind of living that regular life. I thought that was really fun, and even though he's expanding further and he'll be in a lot more movies, I still hope they kind of keep that same feel, especially with Tom Holland. You get that innocence factor. So, all right, well, what else do you have coming up? What are you trying to catch this week? Is there anything else that you're trying to see?
I might check out Bumblebee, but there's really nothing big coming out until Glass on January 19th.
Oh, so we got a little bit of a layoff. I know TV-wise, mostly everything's off for the holidays now, so I finally finished Sabrina. I haven't got a chance to watch the holiday special yet, so I'm going to try and catch that. Mid-90s just came out, the Jonah Hill movie, the Jonah Hill directed movie. I'm going to try and catch that one. I was really excited. I didn't get a chance to catch that one in theaters. And then, obviously, I'm going to see Mary Poppins this weekend as well, too. So, hopefully, if you get a chance to see Bumblebee, we'll be able to knock out quite a few of those major holiday movies.
With that being said, thank you for tuning in. As always, I am B. Frank.
And I'm Travis.
And we are worth the admission.
See you next week.
And Merry Christmas.